thank you so much for the chat. जो भी ये देख रहा है, if even you are interested in giving SBR, और अगर आप भी SBR ये दिसंबर अटेम्प्ट में दे रहे हो, then just DM me on इंस्टा. मेरे किसी भी वीडियो के नीचे आपको मेरा इंस्टा आईडी मिल जाएगा. We can study together. फिफ्टियथ क्वेश्चन अभी मैं स्टार्ट कर रहा हूँ. Zedtech. Zedtech is a software development company listed on local stock exchange which provides data hosting and other professional services. As part of these services, Zedtech is also securely hosts a range of inventory management software online which allows businesses to manage inventory from anywhere in the world. It also sells hardware in certain circumstances. If then work together. That takes us two distinct software packages. The first package named Zero Inventory. एक मिनट इधर ना क्वेश्चन भी पढ़ लेते हैं so that we get a better idea. Discuss the principles of IFRS 15 revenue from contracts with customers, which should be used by Zedtech to determine the recognition of the above contracts. Principles of IFRS 15 from revenue which should be used by Zedtech to determine recognition of the above contracts. तो सबसे पहली बात तो revenue is an income earned through an entity's normal course of business activities. ठीक है. According to IFRS 15, सबसे पहली बात तो we will say that a revenue is recognized. First of all, the revenue is recognized. It is important to determine whether the revenue is recognized at the point in time or during the course of the business और मतलब over the period of time. ऐसा ठीक है, वो अपन बोल देंगे. सबसे पहली बात तो Zedtech is a software development company listed on stock exchange which provides data hosting for other professional services. As part of these services, Zedtech also securely hosts a range of inventory management software online which allows businesses to manage inventory from anywhere in the world. It also sells hardware in certain circumstances. Zedtech sells two distinct software packages. The first package, named Zero Inventory, gives the customer the option to buy the hardware, professional services, and hosting services as separate, distinct contracts. Each element of the package can be purchased without affecting the performance of the other element. Zedtech regularly sells each service separately and generally does not integrate the goods and services into a single contract. एक मिनट ना. Discuss how the above contract should be recognized in financial statements. तो ये तो है ना, दोनों जो हमें ये पैकेजेस दिए हुए हैं ना, ये देखो जीरो इन्वेंट्री एंड इन्वेंट्री एक्स, ये हमको क्वेश्चन नंबर 2 में बताने हैं. सो क्वेश्चन नंबर 1 में हमें सिर्फ प्रिंसिपल्स बताने हैं. तो प्रिंसिपल्स की बात करें तो हाउ शुड अ रेवेन्यू बी रिकॉग्नाइज्ड. देयर आर 5 स्टेप्स फॉर इट. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, identify a company should first of all identify the contract. Second, determine any separate obligation that it has to fulfill under the contract. Next, determine the transaction price. Next, allocate the transaction price into each of the separate obligations or separate things in the contract. And last वाला जो step है उसमें recognize revenue as and when the service has been provided. ये है. तो I think this should be the principle according to IFRS 15. यार और क्या होगा. IFRS 15, revenue from contract with customers, states that an entity must first identify the contract with the customer. As part of the entity must determine whether it is probable that the consideration with the entity is entitled to the exchange for the goods and services will be collected. Once an entity has identified the contract with customer, it evaluates the contractual terms and its customary business practices. To identify all promised goods or services within the contract, it must determine which of those promised goods or services will be treated as separate performance obligations. A good or service is distinct if the customer can benefit from the good or service on its own and together with the resources readily available. I think हमने, of course we cannot just copy paste their language, but हमने more or less जो उन्होंने बोला है वही बोला है. So दिस वन इज ओके बिकॉज देखो हमने ना टेक्स्ट बुक की लैंग्वेज बोली है, ये रही, मैं ना यहाँ पे खोल ही लेता हूँ वो 5 स्टेप्स। ये रहा 5-step process. Identify the contract, identify separate performance obligations within the contract, determine the transaction price, allocate the transaction price into performance obligations in the contract, and recognize the revenue as and when the performance obligation is satisfied. So मतलब हमने कहीं ना कहीं ये सेम ही बोला है यार, it's okay. मतलब of course it was not the word to word or the heavy language which they have used, but we were still able to give most of the things correct. Basic crunch तो सही था. Discuss how the above contract should be recognized in financial statements of Zedtech under IFRS 15. Discuss how the above contract should be recognized as Zedtech. तो इन्वेंट्री एक्स और इन्वेंट्री जीरो इसके लिए देखते हैं. Zedtech sells two distinct software packages. The first package, named Zero Inventory, gives the customer the option to buy the hardware, professional services, and hosting services as separate and distinct contracts. Each element of the package can be purchased without affecting the performance of the other element. Zedtech regularly sells each service separately and generally does not integrate the goods or service into a single contract. तो फॉर जीरो इन्वेंट्री ना, हाँ फॉर जीरो इन्वेंट्री if we see the hardware, professional services and hosting services are treated separately, ठीक है, and each of the revenue should also be treated separately because they are separate performance obligations as per the contract. तो जो भी transaction price होगा ये इन तीनों का अलग अलग होगा, ठीक है. We can further go in detail and say that hardware can be sold at the point in time, and so its revenue can be recognized at the point in time. However, when it comes to professional services and hosting services, these services these might be the services that are fulfilled over the period of time. So उनका जो revenue है हमको recognize करना है over the period of time. We cannot club them, ऐसा इन्होंने खुद ने हमको बोल के दिया हुआ, ठीक है. अब आते हैं सेकंड पैकेज में. विद द सेकंड पैकेज इन्वेंट्री एक्स, हार्डवेयर इज ऑलवेज सोल्ड along with the professional and hosting services, and the customer cannot use the hardware on its own. The hardware is integral to the delivery of the hosted software. Zedtech delivers the hardware first, followed by professional services, and finally the hosting services. However, professional services can be sold on a standalone basis, as this is distinct service which Zedtech can offer to any customer. तो जो हमने पहले 5 स्टेप्स बोले थे ना, हम उन्हीं 5 स्टेप्स का एक क्या बोलते हैं, एक एलोकेशन देंगे यहाँ पे कि द फर्स्ट स्टेप इज आइडेंटिफाई द कॉन्ट्रैक्ट. सो यहाँ पे द कॉन्ट्रैक्ट इज टू प्रोवाइड प्रोफेशनल होस्टिंग एंड हार्डवेयर सर्विस टू द कस्टमर्स. तो हार्डवेयर का प्रोडक्ट देंगे और बाकी दो की सर्विसेज देंगे और कस्टमर को. एंड द कस्टमर कैन नॉट यूज द हार्डवेयर ऑन इट्स ओन. तो यहाँ पे बोला गया कस्टमर ऑन इट्स ओन हार्डवेयर यूज ही नहीं कर सकता. इट्स ओके. Zedtech delivers the hardware is integral to the delivery and hosted software. Okay, Zedtech delivers the hardware first, followed by professional services. तो सबसे पहले उस चीज का एक परफॉर्मेंस ऑब्लिगेशन होगा, एंड जो ट्रांजैक्शन, अभी देखो इस पूरे पैकेज का ना एक ट्रांजैक्शन प्राइस होगा, एंड दिस ट्रांजैक्शन प्राइस शुड बी प्रॉपरली डिवाइडेड और शुड बी for each of the service or product. Transaction price should be allocated separately and should be recognized accordingly, ठीक है. बाकी तो क्या ही है, यहाँ पे सेपरेट था, यहाँ पर सब कुछ मिला के दिया हुआ है. सेपरेट है तो फॉर सेपरेट थिंग्स हम लोग सेपरेट रेवेन्यू रिकॉग्नाइज करेंगे, और यहाँ पे टुगेदर है, सो वी हैव टू एलोकेट दैट ट्रांजैक्शन प्राइस. आई डोंट थिंक इसके अलावा कुछ बोलने लायक है टू बी ऑनेस्ट. देखते हैं साथ में से इन्होंने क्या लिखा है. As regards to zero inventory, it seems that all of the individual goods and services in the contract are distinct because the entity regularly sells each element of the contract separately and is not providing the significant service of integrating the goods or service. Perfect. Also, the customer could purchase each good and service without significantly affecting the other goods and service purchased. There is no dependence upon individual elements of the service. Thus, hardware, professional services and hosting services should each be accounted for a separate performance obligation. Perfect. लेकिन जो inventory X है वो important है. Regarding inventory X, the professional services are distinct because Zedtech frequently sells those services on a standalone basis. These should be dealt with as a separate performance obligation. चलो ठीक है ये भी perfect. Or hardware is integral to the delivery of the hosted software and cannot be used on its own. This means that the provision of the hardware and hosting services together. अच्छा ये अपने नहीं बोला था कि हार्डवेयर और होस्टिंग सर्विसेज को टुगेदर एक परफॉर्मेंस ऑब्लिगेशन बोलना है. बट व्हाट वी हैव लर्नड फ्रॉम प्रीवियस टाइम्स इज दैट देखो अगर आंसर का हमने बेसिक क्रंच, जैसे कि मैं क्या करता हूँ, मैं यूजुअली जो टेक्स्ट बुक के जो बेसिक क्रंच होते हैं वो मैं पहले एक्सप्लेन कर देता हूँ एंड मैं सम के ऊपर या उस केस स्टडी के ऊपर बाद में आता हूँ. अगर आंसर को और बड़ा करना है सो वी कैन जस्ट कॉपी पेस्ट द केस स्टडी के कुछ पॉइंट्स एंड रिलेट देम टू द अबाउ क्या बोलते हैं IAS और IFRS ऐसा. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट नहीं इधर इतना एक और चीज़ थी. आई एम सो सॉरी. Collectability. Zedtech has entered into an arrangement and does not expect to collect full contractual amount such that the contract contains an implied price concession. Therefore, Zedtech needs to assess the collectability of the amount to which it expects to be entitled to. Needs to assess the collectability of the amount to which it is entitled to rather than the stated contractual amount. Zedtech assesses whether collectability is probable, whether the customer has the ability and intent to pay the estimated transaction price. Zedtech will determine the amount to which it expects to be entitled is 2.4 million and performs the collectability assessment based on the amount rather than the contractually priced 3 million. ये कहाँ था? Oh, I think guys we didn't read this paragraph. I thought this paragraph is based upon the B part, इसलिए मैंने ये वाला part पढ़ा नहीं. एक बार पढ़ लेते हैं, then we can try. Zedtech has decided to sell its services in a new region of the world which is suffering from economic downturn. The entity expects the economy to recover and feels that there is a scope for significant growth in the future. Zedtech has entered into an arrangement with the customer in this region for the promised consideration of 3 million. At the contract inception, Zedtech feels that it may not be able to collect the full amount from the customer and estimates that it may collect 80% of the consideration. स्टार्टिंग में इन्होंने यहाँ पे दो डिस्टिंक्ट पैकेजेस बोल दिया ना, तो मैंने दो पढ़ के छोड़ दिया, ऐसा होगा. कोई बात नहीं. भी ये जो नई सर्विस दे रहा है ये एक नई रीजन में दे रहा है जहाँ पर इसने 3 मिलियन का वादा किया था लेकिन 80% ही अभी सिर्फ ये कलेक्ट कर पा रहा है. तो हाउ विल वी अकाउंट फॉर दिस? Zedtech has entered into an agreement and does not expect to collect the full amount such as the contract. ठीक है. Therefore, Zedtech needs to assess the collectability of the amount to which it expects to be entitled rather than the stated contractual amount. Zedtech assesses whether collectability is probable, whether the customer has the ability to and intent to pay the estimated transaction price. Zedtech will determine that the amount to which it expects to be entitled is 2.4 million and performs the collectability assessment based on that amount rather than contractually price of 3 million. तो मतलब वो जो काम है वो इसके हिसाब से कर रहा है कि उसको 2.4 मिलियन ही मिलने वाला है ना कि 3 मिलियन. बेसिकली अपना खाली ट्रांजैक्शन प्राइस जो है वो चेंज हो रहा है, बाकी कुछ नहीं हो रहा है. यू सी हियर Zedtech assesses whether the collectability is probable, whether the customer has ability to or an intent to pay the estimated transaction price. अब अगर नहीं है estimated transaction price करने की वो क्षमता, तो क्या होगा कि Zedtech will determine that the amount to which it expects to be entitled is 2.4 million and performs the collectability assessment based on that amount. अभी ये जो भी कलेक्टिबिलिटी असेसमेंट है वो ये 2.4 मिलियन के भी बेसिस पे करेगा कि मेरे को 2.4 मिलियन ही मिलने वाला है. दैट्स इट, और कुछ नहीं है इसमें. The directors of Zedtech have heard through industry forums and think tanks that the sustainability reporting is becoming a primary focus of the executives within Zedtech's industry. Zedtech's management are keen to promote the ways that Zedtech positions sustainability at the core of its operations. They discuss the specific factors that Zedtech must consider to ensure they operate in sustainable fashion, and how sustainability reporting could be important to Zedtech's management and stakeholders. Discuss the specific factors that Zedtech must consider to ensure they operate in sustainable fashion, and how sustainability reporting could have be important to Zedtech's management and stakeholders. करंटली सस्टेनेबिलिटी अच्छा एक मिनट 8 मार्क्स के लिए ओके बहुत ज़्यादा चीज़ें मतलब बोलनी पड़ेंगी फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल सस्टेनेबिलिटी इज़ अ हॉट टॉपिक इन द करंट सिनेरियो ठीक है अ लॉट ऑफ इन्वेस्टर्स आर नाउ changing their direction of looking at financial statements, and now not only financial statements but also sustainability reporting has become an important aspect because entities are more or investors are more focused on the future of the company or on the social, economic and growth objectives of the company. हाँ सस्टेनेबिलिटी क्या है पहले अपन वो भी मतलब बता देते हैं. So sustainability refers to properly utilizing the current resources that are available without harming the resources for the future generations. The need for future generations. उसके बाद हाँ, in current years we can see that there are 17 SDGs, which is Sustainable Development Goals, issued by the United Nations, which include no hunger, no poverty, economic growth तक ठीक है, development नहीं बोलते. Then education equality, मतलब everyone should get equal education and all that stuff हम बोलेंगे. Um, Companies are more interested in fulfilling these SDGs these days because by fulfilling the sustainable development goals and effectively reporting them as per sustainable reporting, the chances of getting government funding, the chances से ज़्यादा the government funding increases. और ऐसे chances बोल सकते हैं क्या? चलिए फिलहाल के लिए बोल देते हैं, बाद में आंसर चेक कर लेंगे which word they have used. The chances of government funding increases if the investors are some kind of lending institutions, then then these investors might you know lend entities uh, investments at a very low rate or at a lower rate. um, उसके बाद और क्या बोल सकते हैं. अभी जब कंपनी इतना ज़्यादा हो हल्ला कर रही है कि भाई हम वी आर लाइक what we can say, following all the norms, we are sustainable, we are following the norms in order to fulfill the 17 SDGs and sustainability reporting kar rahe hain. So they should ensure that they are not overstating their guarantees or they are not overstating their accomplishments, because if they are overstating it, and then 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 the expectations of the investors increases, and if they are not able to fulfill the expectation, the investors might feel disrespected and not invest any more funds in the entity. और क्या हो सकता है. डिस्कस स्पेसिफिक फैक्टर्स कंसिडर. ये सारे फैक्टर्स को कंसिडर करना चाहिए जेडटेक ने. और कोई पॉइंट्स होंगे तो चलो देख लेते हैं उनके आंसर में. Sustainability has become an increasingly crucial aspect of running a business, and as a consequence, the reporting of sustainability is a hot accounting topic. The UN has produced 17 sustainability development goals, and buy-in from industry has part to play in achieving these goals. There is also a growing recognition that sustainability can have a significant effect on a company's financial performance. Entities are more likely to volunteer to disclose the methods and process that will help to achieve these SDGs through increased sustainability reporting. Therefore, the directors of Zedtech should consider how their operational practices may impact sustainability. हाँ how their operational ये एक्चुअली ना हम आंसर्स बड़ा करने के लिए बोल सकते हैं कि द मैनेजमेंट शुड कंसिडर फॉलोइंग as many sustainability goals or fulfilling as many sustainability development goals as possible वगैरह वगैरह भी बोल सकते हैं एक्चुअली आंसर बड़ा ही करना था 8 मार्क्स के लिए बोलना था. Then the nature of Zedtech's business creates variety of factors that the director should consider which may affect sustainability. Zedtech has a software development company, operates in the high-tech industry. It provides data hosting services and online inventory management services. It can be assumed that Zedtech operates using large server networks, possibly utilizing cloud storage. This assumption can be ratified through the lease agreement for servers entered into by Zedtech. Online storage data utilizes vast amounts of energy through the powering and maintenance of the servers required. CO2 emissions are a significant concern for Zedtech to be considered a sustainable business. It should be actively investigating. It should be actively investigating ways that could reduce Zedtech's carbon footprint. अच्छा हम environment के ऊपर भी जा सकते थे. It should actively be investigating ways to reduce the carbon footprint, for example, utilizing the renewable energy strategies for server temperature reductions, etc. So, you know what? We just answered this much. We just answered this much part. We should have actually answered, we should have actually taken into consideration this whole thing. इसके ऊपर हम सब सारी चीज़ें मतलब बोल सकते थे पर ठीक है एग्जाम में क्वेश्चन बाजू में रहेगा so maybe we can. Zedtech has recently started to provide services in a new geographical location. अरे यार if Zedtech has started providing services to a new geographical location, then Zedtech should follow the sustainability development goals that are of main concern to that particular region. Like अगर वहाँ पे एम्प्लॉयमेंट नहीं है तो वहाँ पे एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेट कर पाना यार ये बोल सकते थे ये we didn't go to the first 3 paragraphs at all. That was stupid. This could create different or unforeseen sustainability risks for Zedtech. Proper research should have been undertaken before entering the marketplace to ensure operational practices within the region do not expose Zedtech to a negative press. For example, if the region has less rigorous labor laws in place, has a reputation for promoting inequality with the workplace, operates under poor working conditions, or has negative reputation regarding environmental concerns, the actions provided by Zedtech to ensure the new region operates in sustainable fashion should form part of sustainability reporting. Like for example, CO2 emissions. यार अगर CO2 emission USA में से एक पर्टिकुलर अमाउंट मतलब 200 तक चलता था तो शायद वो पर्टिकुलरली मिसिसिपी में 120 का ही चलेगा या 150 का ही चलेगा. अब वो 200 का नहीं चलेगा. द एंटायर यूएसए में 200 का चल रहा है लेकिन वो छोटे से पार्ट मिसिसिपी में 150 का ही चल रहा है तो वो नहीं चलेगा. तो उस छोटे से लोकेशन के ऊपर भी हमको हमारे सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट गोल्स एडजस्ट करनी चाहिए और उसके हिसाब से सस्टेनेबिलिटी की वो रिपोर्टिंग करनी चाहिए. The same considerations applied to the region as a whole could also be applied to the customers and if necessary the suppliers. If the local servers were required to facilitate the contracts with which Zedtech undertakes the business in new regions, Zedtech cannot declare to be at the forefront of sustainable business if the entities with which they trade do not share the same approach. If that were the case, Zedtech's reputation will be tarnished. If Zedtech cannot declare to be the forefront of sustainable business if the entities with which it deals do not share the same approach. इसका ये मतलब है कि let's assume कि हमारा एक supplier है बराबर है. Now हम तो सारे के सारे sustainability development goals जो है वो फुलफिल कर रहे हैं, लेकिन हमारा सप्लायर जो है वो सारे सारे के सारे सस्टेनेबिलिटी डेवलपमेंट गोल्स नहीं फुलफिल कर रहा है। बेसिकली हमारे जो प्रोस्पेक्ट्स है वो भी सस्टेनेबिलिटी डेवलपमेंट गोल्स को मतलब फॉलो करनी चाहिए, या वो भी सस्टेनेबिलिटी को कंसिडर करना चाहिए ऐसा। The new region of operations could create the need for more travel and for exporting hardware overseas. This would lead to an increase in Zedtech's carbon footprint. The zero inventory and inventory X packages provide hardware to Zedtech's customers. Consideration of the impact to the environment of the production and disposal of Zedtech hardware would be an important sustainability factor that should be demonstrable. Zedtech would want to promote any use of recycled raw materials and production of recyclable and biodegradable finished goods. The main stakeholders companies, यार मैं स्टेक होल्डर्स के नाम ही बता देता तो भी हाँ आंसर बड़ा बन जाता। Customers, suppliers, governments and public are increasingly integrating consideration of sustainability issues into their decision making. Stakeholders require a great understanding of the wider social and environmental context in which the business operates, creating a positive picture through the adoption of sustainability practices, and their subsequent disclosure invokes greater trust and credibility with stakeholders. मतलब यही कि बेसिकली वो लोग अपनी लैंडिंग बढ़ा देते हैं कि अगर क्रेडिबिलिटी विद द स्टेक ग्रेटर ट्रस्ट एंड क्रेडिबिलिटी विद द स्टेक होल्डर्स in their eagerness to present an image of promoting sustainability, the directors of Zedtech must be wary of overstating, मतलब must take into consideration that they are not overstating their sustainable practices ऐसा. If the decision by stakeholders are influenced by proclamations included within the sustainable report, which subsequently are proven to have no substance, the resulting backlash could tarnish the reputation of Zedtech, perhaps to great levels, than if Zedtech ignored sustainability issues altogether. Perhaps to greater levels than if Zedtech ignored sustainability issues together. Zedtech could find itself subject to swathes of negative press, customer, investor boycotts, and even protests at company locations. मतलब बेसिकली अगर रेपुटेशन टार्निश हो गई तो हमने जो इतनी ज़्यादा इज्जत कमाई थी वो ख़राब हो जाएगी, एंड मतलब बॉयकॉट करने पे चीज़ें आ सकती है। नेगेटिव प्रेस मतलब न्यूज़पेपर्स में गलत चीज़ें बोल दे सकते हैं लोग ऐसा। As Zedtech is a listed company, investors, whether current or potential, are clear. एक मिनट ना, potential, just as Zedtech is a listed company, investors, whether current or potential, are clearly an important stakeholder. In recent times, investor group have shown an appetite for products which recognize and reflect the relationship between their investments and social and environmental conduct. Investors need to completely understand the nature of the companies in which they are looking to invest, and are like to incorporate sustainability factors into investment decisions. Analysis of the impact Ztech has on sustainability could be the deciding factor for potential investors. If the company is viewed poorly based on its sustainability performance, it could lead to potential investor investing their money elsewhere. ये भी एक पॉइंट अपन ने सीख लिया यहाँ पे कि अगर खराब हो गई रेपुटेशन, तो जो इन्वेस्टर्स है पोटेंशियल इन्वेस्टर्स, दे माइट इन्वेस्ट आवर मनी इन सम अदर कंपनी। ठीक है, हाँ आगे ये भी सेकेंड पॉइंट होगा ये। Explain the deferred tax implications caused by the lease arrangement entered into by Zedtech. Zedtech has a reporting date of 31st of December 11. On the reporting date, it enters into a 5-year lease agreement to hire a new server to improve software performance. It hires a new server to improve the software performance and deal with increased data storage requirements. The present value of the lease payments to be made is 15 million. The lease rentals are paid in advance and the first 4 million has already been paid. In Zedtech's tax jurisdiction, tax relief on leases is given in respect of lease liability as payments are made and the tax rate is 20%. Okay, this is a real challenge because मैंने ये deferred tax का chapter मेरा बहुत weak है, but I have studied this particular part of it जहाँ पर लीज लायबिलिटी के टाइम पे रिलीफ मिलता है. सो व्हाट वी विल डू इज हम अपने 5 ईयर लीज में आए हैं, ठीक है, एंड प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ द लीज पेमेंट्स इज 15 million. लीज रेंटल्स आर पेड इन एडवांस एंड द फर्स्ट 4 million हैज ऑलरेडी बीन पेड. तो सबसे पहली बात तो when there is a lease agreement to hire a new server to improve software performance and deal, तो ये ना मैं पूरा का पूरा कॉपी पेस्ट करूंगा. देखो ये जो चीज़ है ये पूरा कॉपी पेस्ट. So at this point of time, a journal entry will be passed and a right of use asset will be recognized and a lease liability will be recognized. Okay, will be recognized. Lease rentals are paid in advance. The first one, okay. In Zedtech's tax jurisdiction, a tax relief on leases is available in respect of lease liability. So therefore, a temporary difference will arise of the carrying amount of lease liability being I think अभी देखो 15 million की 19 million वो डिपेंड कर जाएगा. लीज रेंटल्स ऑलरेडी पे कर चुके हैं ये लोग. 15 million होगा फिर क्योंकि एक ऑलरेडी पे कर दिया ना इन लोगों ने. तो 15 million 15 million. चलो ठीक है, लेट्स गो विद 15 million फॉर नाउ एंड वील चेक. अगर मैं आंसर गलत है तो कोई बात नहीं, बाद में चेक कर लेंगे. So the carrying amount of lease liability is 15 million. The tax base for lease liability is 0. So a temporary difference will arise of 15. तो फिलहाल के लिए देखो अभी मेरा कैरिंग अमाउंट है ही नहीं, टैक्स बेस सॉरी मेरा टैक्स बेस है ही नहीं, कैरिंग अमाउंट ज़्यादा है. सो दिस वुड लीड टू अ डेफर्ड टैक्स लायबिलिटी बीइंग क्रिएटेड. In the same way, the ROU assets carrying amount will be 0 and the tax base of the ROU asset will be 15, uh, which would lead to a temporary difference again of 15. So now the entry would be deferred tax asset account debit to deferred tax liability account. 15 million का 20%, 15 million का 20% ऐसा होगा. Let's just check. In accordance with IFRS 16 leases, the lease liability is recognized for 15 million, perfect, being the present value of the future lease payment. The right of use asset is recognized as 19 million क्योंकि 15 million plus जो 4 million हमने एडवांस में पे कर दिया था वो. However, initial advance payment needs to be considered for deferred tax purposes separately from the recognition of lease liability of right of use. ओके सो हमने पहले क्या किया था, वी आर कंफ्यूज बिटवीन 19 एंड 15, बट व्हाट दे आर सेइंग इसकी जो एडवांस पेमेंट किया है ना उसको एक अलग ही तरीके से ट्रीट करो, लाइक उसको जस्ट ट्रीट देम एज अ सेपरेट परफॉर्मेंस ऑब्लिगेशन, राइट, सेपरेटली पर्पस सेपरेटली. ठीक है, तो हम लोगों ने जो चीज़ पहले 15 मिलियन इंटू 20% के लिए की, डेफर्ड टैक्स एसेट अकाउंट डेबिट टू डेफर्ड टैक्स लायबिलिटी अकाउंट, हमें वैसी एक सेम चीज़ काइंड ऑफ सेम चीज़ फॉर एडवांस पेमेंट करनी है. उसमें कैसा होगा कि डेफर्ड टैक्स लायबिलिटी अकाउंट क्रेडिट होगा, एनीथिंग टैक्स एक्सपेंस को डेबिट करना है. मैंने ये ऐसी जनरल एंट्री देखी थी मेरे टेक्स्ट बुक में. So considering the deferred tax created by the initial recognition of the lease liability, firstly the tax relief granted in this jurisdiction relates to lease liability of 15 million rather than right of use asset. This causes the tax base of right of use asset to be nil. बराबर ये अपने बोला था, and the carrying amount is initially 15 million and so the taxable temporary difference is 15 million which gives rise to deferred tax liability. ये देखो, the tax base of lease liability is nil and यहाँ पे carrying amount of lease liability is 15, so deductible temporary difference is 15 million again. So this would lead to deferred tax एसेट। तो लीज लायबिलिटी, ओके, सो लीज लायबिलिटी से अगर वो अमाउंट कैरिंग अमाउंट ज़्यादा है तो वो डेफर्ड टैक्स एसेट बन रहा है। लेकिन अगर वही चीज़ अपने क्या बोलते हैं राइट ऑफ यूज एसेट अकाउंट में कैरिंग अमाउंट ज़्यादा और टैक्स बेस निल है तो फिर डेफर्ड टैक्स लायबिलिटी बनती है। सो वी गॉट टू लर्न दैट the transaction is not a business combination as it affects neither accounting profit nor the taxable profit. The transaction is not a business combination. हाँ, ये एक्चुअली ना एक लाइन है विच इज़ वेरी वेरी ब्यूटीफुल लाइन एंड मैंने ये सोचा था कि मुझे ये बाय हार्ट करनी है बट आई कुड नॉट बाय हार्ट दिस लाइन। The transaction is not a business combination and thus it affects neither profit nor taxable profit. Neither accounting profit nor taxable profit. However, equal amounts of deductible and taxable differences, uh, equal amounts of deductible, taxable, temporary differences are created. A deferred tax asset would be recognized for 3 million, assuming that sufficient future profits are expected against which the difference can be utilized. A deferred tax liability would also be recognized for 3 million. तो ये हो गया deferred tax asset account debit to deferred tax liability account. Then initial advance payment की बात की गई है is considered for deferred tax purposes separately from the recognition of right of use asset and lease liability. The advance rental of 4 million is included in the right of use asset but not in the lease liability. मतलब देखो लीज लाइबिलिटी का जो 15 मिलियन इसीलिए शो कर रहा है बिकॉज 4 मिलियन जो है उसका ऑलरेडी पेमेंट हो चुका है पीएनएल डेबिट में। लेकिन राइट ऑफ यूज एसेट में तो अभी भी 4 मिलियन का वो शो कर रहा है ना। मतलब राइट ऑफ यूज एसेट जो हमने एक्चुअली रिकॉग्नाइज किया वो एक्चुअली हमने 19 मिलियन का वहाँ पर रिकॉग्नाइज किया होगा ऊपर। सो दैट्स वाई वो जो डिफरेंस है वो आर ओ यू में वो 4 मिलियन का दिख रहा है। सो द टैक्स बेस इज नील। This is a taxable temporary difference of 4 million in right of use asset. बराबर है ना। अब the advance payments do not affect accounting profit but they do affect the taxable profit as tax relief is granted as the cash is paid. So a deferred tax liability will need to be recorded. A deferred tax liability is recognized for 0.8 million which is 4 million का 20%. A corresponding tax expense is recognized in the statement of profit or loss. तो ये रही वो journal entry, tax expense debit and deferred tax liability account credit.